Um, so the first thing on the agenda, and I don't see that there's anybody else on as far as the public, so that's good. Okay, so the first thing on the agenda then would be the election of the new chair and vice chair. And did everybody get the handout for the nominations? Okay, Matt, I'm gonna let you take this part over.
I don't know. It's going to be, super complicated, but thanks for trusting me to run the election. Hopefully it will be less contentious than the last one we had. Yes, Carol.
You're on mute, Carol.
I'm not a candidate.
For vice chair?
There was a different list indicated earlier, and that was a change, so I'm not on there. Should not be on there.
Okay, so you were nominated to be vice chair. We can remove you from the list if you'd like.
That's what I told you in December, right? That I wasn't able to be on there. So I don't know if you've confirmed everyone, but anyway.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then we will have Carol's name taken off of the vice chair nomination list per her request. So first we're going to vote for chair. We currently have two nominations or two nominees for it. We've got Damian Arguello and Anaya Robinson nominated. I wanted to ask the group, do you want to vote in the chat? Do you want to vote, just versus eyes? Like how do you want to go about this? Any recommendations on secret ballot, not secret ballot? I mean, it's kind of up to the group to kind of how they want to do it. So I'm open to suggestions.
So there's no rules.
Don't all jump at once.
There's no
rules. Roll call. I like that idea, Peg, that we do a roll call. That's fine. It can be in the clear.
Yeah, and I was just asking if there's any rules on how we take a vote.
Well, and since I don't know anybody personally, I don't. It doesn't have to be that formal, right?
I was hoping it wouldn't have to be, but
like in Congress, consent, right?
Well, only one of our candidates is in attendance anyway. So, are we going to vote for the person who did not show up for the meeting?
Would serve him right. I'm just teasing.
I know, seriously, Bobby.
Everybody will vote for him because he's not here.
Exactly.
But I'm totally comfortable running a roll call vote. We'll call on each person, and you just state who you would like to vote for, whether it be Damian or Anaya, and we'll go from there. All right. So according to my Hollywood squares, I'm going to go clockwise around my list, so it may not match yours. First I've got is Wendy Rauter. Who would you like to vote for chair?
So I don't know, because I'd like to hear from the candidates, but anyway, I'd like to hear from Anaya before I vote. So I'm going to abstain at this. I don't know how it was.
I think that is
so that's.
I think it's perfectly fine to go ahead and have Anaya speak if they would like to.
Sure. I will be very brief. I did not nominate myself, but I am more than happy to serve in the position if that is what the council decides. Also happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
So I have a question. What do you see as your main role as chair?
I think facilitation of the meetings to make sure that we're moving forward on things and getting recommendations to the commissioner in as timely a manner as possible, but just moving things along so that we as a council can accomplish what we are tasked to do.
Thank you. Do you still are we still doing me as the voter? This is Wendy Rauter speaking.
I was going to say the downside is because Damian's not here, we can't ask him any questions, but we definitely have quorum. So I would say, yeah, Wendy, we'll go ahead.
Well, I vote for Anaya because he's here and he wants to move things along. I think that's a good goal.
Okay, you know, that works. All right. Next on my list, Mr. Gray.
And what is the question again? I forgot. It's about how we're going to vote, or
I think it's the actual vote. We're just doing a quick roll call vote of who you'd like to vote for.
the chair? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm not on mute. Okay. Oh, of the two, only one's here today, so I don't object to that. So I guess I'm a yay then to like whoever's here that is willing to be chair. I don't know the background of anybody, but it
So
sounds.
just to confirm, that's
Yeah. So you can put me down for a yay for Anaya, right?
all right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Carol, you're next on my Hollywood Squares.
I vote for Mr. Robinson for attending.
It's sometimes it's just the people who show up. It's what you got to do. All right. Anaya, do you have a preference of who you would like to vote for? Because as we all know, the president can vote for themselves for election if they want. So I don't see why you can't.
I've never felt comfortable with that rule. Just to make it a little fair, I'm gonna toss a vote to Damien.
Okay. Duly noted. All right, Miss Hunt, you are next.
I vote for Anaya.
Thank you. Miss Ellefson.
I vote for Anaya because he is consistently at all the meetings.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
I vote for Anaya.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Paone.
I nominated Anaya, and so I will vote for him as well.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Appears that Anaya has a plurality of votes, so Anaya has been elected the chair of the Consumer Insurance Council going forward. So that concludes that part of the election. Now we have the vote for vice chair. We have now 3 names just to review. They were sent out by Bobby earlier. We have Peg Ellefson has been nominated, Eileen Hunt has been nominated, and Mark Nguyen have all been nominated for position of vice chair. Since we have all of them here, I think probably give each an opportunity to say.
I had a little blip of sound. Would you mind
Sure.
repeating that? Sorry.
Oh, of course, not a problem. We have Peg Ellefson, Eileen Hunt, and Mark Nguyen have all been nominated to be vice chair. And since we have them all here, I say, give each a brief a minute or two to say why they want to be vice chair and answer any questions, and we can vote similar to the last one. So Peg Ellefson, I'll let you go first since you're alphabetically first on the list.
Well, I'm honored by whoever nominated me. I did serve the last year as vice chair, but I'm also okay with passing the baton on to either Eileen or Mark.
Peg, do you want to withdraw your name or do you want to be considered?
I think I'll withdraw my name because I think I had put on there. I don't know that I can devote time to being chair or vice chair, so I'll withdraw my name.
Okay, thank you very much. So that leaves Eileen Hunt and Mark Nguyen. Eileen, do you have any words to share with the group before we vote?
So I was pleased when somebody nominated me for the chair, but I knew that I wouldn't have the time to do that effectively, and so perhaps I could do the vice chair in a more effective manner. So, but if Mr. Nguyen has a strong desire to be the vice chair, I'm happy to stand aside.
Well, this is
All right,
Mr.
Mr.
Nguyen.
Nguyen.
This is Mr. Nguyen. I don't have a strong desire. I just wanted to be sure we had a vice chair. But Eileen, since you are the experienced council member, I think you should continue. So thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Nguyen. I was just thinking, since you were one of the newest council members, what a great experience for you. But no,
Yeah, well, let's look at the rookie season. I just want
I'm
to.
happy to do it.
Okay.
You want to just
Thank you.
participate. I get that. So yeah, so I'm happy to keep my name in nomination. So.
All right, excellent. All right, Mr. Nguyen, do you have anything you want to share with the group before we vote?
No, this is my rookie year. I think I'll just watch the two experts go, and then maybe I'll run next year.
All right, so with that, the two names we still have for nomination are Eileen Hunt and Mark Nguyen. Again, I'll go through the Hollywood squares. I'll call on you as a roll call vote. Tell us who you would like to select, either Eileen Hunt or Mark Nguyen for vice chair. So with that, or I should say, and when I call on you, if you have any questions for them, feel free to chime in. So Wendy, you're first.
So, Mr. Nguyen, I want to say that I enjoyed your presentation at our last meeting, and I wanted to get that in before I vote for Eileen.
Thank you very much. All right, next, Charles, please, you're next.
Well, since I don't know either one, based on their comments just now, it sounds like Eileen is more, I guess, slightly more interested. So I'll
Seasoned, more seasoned.
Okay, so I'll go Eileen.
All right, thank you, Charles. Carol.
I also want to say, oh, am I there? Yeah. I also want to say that I enjoyed Mark's presentation and his joining of the council, as well as a number of other organizations on a pertinent issue. So I think he'll be a strong member of our council. But since he says he'll run next year, I'll vote for Eileen this year.
Thank you, Carol. Anaya?
I will vote for Eileen. I want to honor Mr. Nguyen's wishes.
All right, Eileen, who would you like to vote for?
I'll vote for me.
Okay. Peg.
Mark, you should run next year, but I'm going to vote for Eileen just because she's been on the council for a number of years.
Seasoned.
Thank you.
Seasoned.
I was going to use experienced, but seasoned works as well.
Exactly.
Mark,
I didn't say
Mark,
well,
what do you? All right, Mr. Nguyen, your vote?
Hi, this is Mark Nguyen. Because I have a strong ego, I'll vote for myself.
Well done. All right, Jackie.
I will vote for seasoned Eileen.
All right, with that vote count then, our vice chair for the coming year is Eileen Hunt. So this has been recorded, so the record shows we've got Anaya Robinson has been elected as chair and Eileen Hunt has been elected as vice chair. And that takes care of this portion of the agenda. And next, I believe we have open meeting training by our all-star and bearded Evan Spencer from the AG's office.
It's not a purposeful beard, Matt. It's just grown into itself. I have the same presentation that many of you saw last year, so I'll try and go through it as quickly as I can. And for those of you that are new, feel free to either ask questions during the presentation. If they're more substantive questions, I might suggest that we go into executive session, or if questions come up throughout the year, feel free to email Bobby or Matt, and they can forward it to me. You guys are fortunate to have Matt this year because he is the former Cora czar for the Division of Insurance. So he is very knowledgeable in that.
Unfortunately, it's not former yet. They haven't hired
still not
anybody to
former?
replace me in that. So.
That's really great to know.
All right. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So a lot of this was more useful last year, just in terms of setting up the CIC, since that was our first go around, but I'll just cover it really quickly. Created in 10-1-133, your guys' membership is 6 to 15 members. Each of you has been appointed by the commissioner. You serve 2-year terms. We just held the elections for chair and vice chair. The council is an advisory body to the commissioner. As you guys have gone through last year, you submit recommendations to the commissioner. Recommendations must be made by consensus. You are allowed to seek external sources of information, bring in consumers, bring in representatives of different industries, experts, stuff to that effect. And 4 quarterly meetings, and then an additional 4 meetings, I guess, upon request. Just some general considerations for public service. You're intended to put aside your personal interests while undertaking your duties as a member of the CIC. You serve on behalf of the public at large. Impartial, thoughtful, fair, all this kind of stuff that comes with a volunteer role that you guys are serving.
Evan, I'm only seeing the titles.
Oh, okay. I see what it's doing. Hold on, let me see if I can figure this out. Oh, there we go. Is that working?
Well, now you're not presenting.
Now I'm not presenting. Hold on. All right. Give me 1 second.
Yay. I see duties and responsibilities.
All right, cool. I'm just going to keep it like that, because if I go into anything else, it goes beyond my tech abilities. The advisor, where were we at? General considerations. I guess it's important to note when you're speaking to third parties to note, personal versus council opinions. People might see you guys as representing the council writ large. And so, if you are discussing something with a consumer or, anyone else kind of involved in the insurance world, that might be something to think about when you're having those discussions. And then ex parte contacts outside, this is something you'll know when you see it. I don't imagine that it's going to come up a lot for you guys, but, lobbyists or interested parties seeking favor, if that does come up, feel free to highlight it for Matt, Bobby, and me. And we can kind of discuss whether that should be disclosed. And just to note, I'm not talking about when you guys are talking to consumers or your constituent groups or, anything to that effect. Feel free to talk to those people. That is your role, is to be representative. And I think I said this last year, feel free to bring people in. If someone comes to you with a problem that they're facing with their PNC coverage or their healthcare provider, that you think is something that the CIC should address, bring them in, have them talk about it. I think it's good for the record. I think it's good for everyone else to hear, and it makes people feel heard. So yeah, I always think that's beneficial to bring them into the meeting. Heather and I represent the Division of Insurance. The division has tasked us with representing you guys as well, the CIC. So there is some attorney-client privilege between you as members of the Consumer Insurance Council and us as your attorneys. That's for the privilege attaches when you are seeking legal advice. So, were we to go into executive session and you had substantive questions about, the application of open meetings laws or Cora, or something else that has a legal issue to it, that would be privileged information. And so, that information is protected from disclosure, although it can be waived, and waiver occurs when the client, so that would be the Consumer Insurance Council, waives it. So it can be intentional or inadvertent. If you were to then go out and discuss that with someone outside of the council, the privilege would have been waived. Or if you were to, put an extensive summary of what we discussed in the meeting minutes, with my answers to your questions, that would be a waiver of the privilege. So that's just something to keep in mind. Over the past year, we've had a few questions that have come up. I think we had 1 or 2 executive sessions. So just something to keep in mind when you're drafting the meeting minutes, most likely is where that will come up. And I would just suggest that, you put in something very broad, similar to sought legal advice relating to application of Colorado open meetings laws or something to that effect. Anything additional, might waive privilege and really isn't necessary for your meeting minutes. So on to open meetings laws. It's the policy of the state that the formation of public policy is public business done in public. So there's a few areas where that kind of hits you guys, as I've kind of laid out. Whether it's applicable to you, what constitutes a meeting that would require application of the open meetings laws, what kind of notice is required, what exceptions there are, and then the penalties for failing to comply. So is the council subject to OML? We went over this last year. Yes, you are. So then what does that mean? Any meeting of 2 or more members where a discussion of public business occurs is required to be an open meeting. And so, that there's a few elements in that. There must be 2 of you communicating, and it must be public business. And so what constitutes a meeting and what constitutes public business? A meeting can be anything. If 2 members are communicating via email or over the telephone or via text, CIC business, that would be a violation of the open meetings laws, because the communication itself constitutes a meeting and the discussion is about public business, activities that take place during the CIC. If you're communicating about, having lunch next week or something, totally separate and apart from your role as members of the CIC, that's not going to implicate open meetings law, because it's not going to be about public business. So you really have to have 2 members discussing CIC business, and then in-person telephone, email to raise a red flag. And so, the way we handled this last year worked out fairly well, in that, if there are communications that need to take place, feel free to loop in Bobby or loop in Matt and have them act as the conduit. And another thing to kind of bring up is that this is kind of a form versus substance issue. If you're, drafting the agenda and you just want to place something on the agenda, that's not necessarily an open meetings law. It's when you get into, discussing a recommendation that you're going to set up, discussing something of substance, that's where OML attaches, and that should take place at an open meeting.
Sorry, Evan. So explain the conduit. Why would I need to get Bobby or Matt or somebody involved as a conduit?
Just to avoid the connection between you and another council member.
Oh, I see. So I wouldn't invite Bobby to have coffee with me and Anaya to, I don't know, foment revolution or whatever. But if I had some information that I felt that the chair should follow up on, then I would loop Bobby in and say, you know, can you please pass this along to the chair or to the rest of the council?
Exactly. And
that's what I wanted to understand.
Yeah, when you're drafting that email, just send it to Bobby. Don't CC the other chair member.
Correct. Or that our generic email that we have, Insurance Consumer Council or whatever. So cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's that's exactly what it's for, is when you have something, you know, oh, I want to have further discussion on this point, you know, send that to Bobby so Bobby can pass it along.
Great. Thank you.
Evan, if I can just add one thing to that, sometimes just simply passing it through Bobby won't work, because we can't just make it, as long as it goes through Bobby, it's fine. Because if you guys start exchanging back and forth through Bobby, then potentially there's an OML issue. But at least then if it goes to Bobby first, there can be a quick, like, are we discussing public business? Should I just be forwarding this to everyone? Or do we need to like put this on the agenda for the meeting because we're really discussing public business and it should wait? So that's the other reason going through Bobby and Matt is a good idea. Thanks, Evan.
Oh yeah, no worries. So open meeting law also requires notice. It requires a full and timely notice. The way that works is just the posting of the agenda, the CIC agenda on the division's website. There's no hard and fast rule as to how far in advance that should be posted. I would say at least 24 hours, you know, if not more. The more notice you can give the public, the better. But so far, I think that, you know, you guys have done a good job finalizing the agendas and getting them on the website in advance of the meeting. Mark, I saw that you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
You're muted, Mark.
So I just read in the March 2720 frequently asked questions on public meetings. It says just requires at least 24 hours notice. Of course, we would always strive, I'm sure, committee to do more than 24 hours notice, but the minimum is 24. I agree.
Okay, executive session. Executive session is one of the exceptions to open meetings law. There's a number of reasons why boards and commissions can enter into executive session. For your guys' purposes, it's solely going to be to communicate with Heather and I to seek legal advice. And so the way that operates is there must be a motion. The motion must cite to the statutory authority. So in your case, because it's only going to be legal advice, it's going to be 246402-3A2, and it's got to provide minimal information. So I think we gave you guys a script last year, but you know, an example would be motion to enter executive session pursuant to 246402-3A2 for the purposes of seeking legal advice relating to application of open meetings laws, or, you know, specific, you know, information regarding Cora or something to that effect. 2/3 vote is required. And then were we in person, the public would be removed from the room. In this case, we just set up a simultaneous Google Hangouts or whatever this is. And so, you know, everyone would move over there so that we can ensure that it's just council members, DOI reps, and attorneys in there, so that the privilege does attach. Executive session must be recorded. The DOI is recording and keeping those records. It's limited to the matters permitted by statute, so attorney-client communications and the matters stated in the motion. So, you know, you couldn't say, oh, well, you know, we want to ask about open meetings laws and then, you know, ask for additional legal advice regarding a recommendation that's going up to the commissioner or something. That's just to make sure that, you know, there is some degree of public notice as to what the CIC is doing in executive session. And then no votes during executive session. So, you know, all votes, all decisions, all that stuff must take place in open meeting in the public, just so that, you know, there's no appearance that, you know, things are happening behind closed doors. If you fail to comply, essentially what happens is the action that was taken that did not comply with OML is invalidated. It's, you know, for your guys' purposes, you know, if you were to submit a recommendation to the commissioner in violation of OML, you would just resubmit it. So there's not terrible implications, you know, in terms of the invalidation, but you should comply with open meetings laws at all time. Because there's negative publicity associated with that, litigation, and that can, you know, result in attorney's fees and costs. So open meeting laws, do everything open, you know. If you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out to Matt or Bobby. And something that they feel we should get looped into, they'll follow up.
Well, Mr. Spencer, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So you've mentioned 2/3 vote is required to go in executive session. I wonder why that's not majority, that isn't 75%. 2/3 is very specific. So I just want to be sure that I heard that correct.
2/3, yeah, you heard it correct. As to why it's 2/3, I would have to look into the legislative intent.
That's fine.
I think it's probably just because, you know, because that is shielded from the public, the legislature probably wanted it to be more difficult for boards to go into executive session. There's always a preference for things to be done publicly via public meeting. So
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Colorado open records law. Like I said, you guys are fortunate to have Matt here. It's similar to FOIA, if you're familiar with that. It's that all public records should be available and open for inspection. And so what is a public record? I've got the definition here. For you guys, it would be information relating to your work as a CIC member. So the agenda is a public record, the meeting minutes, the emails that you're sending to Bobby and the CIC email address regarding, you know, CIC work are public records. And so those public records are required to be maintained and available to the public. So in terms of actually complying with CORA, I would say, you know, when you're emailing the division, those records are going to be maintained. So when you're emailing Bobby or Matt or the CIC email address, the division is maintaining and cataloging those on their end for the purposes of responding to any CORA requests. It may be useful to keep those on your end, because if there were a open meetings request, you know, Matt would probably circle back with you to see if you had any records relating to that. So I would suggest that you maintain those records just to make it easier. And if you guys get anything that looks like a request for CIC records, loop in Matt, loop in Bobby. The division on their end, you know, kind of interprets document requests broadly, and so we'll always interpret them as a CORA request. So I would just say apply the same rule of thumb here. So if you get a consumer asking for, you know, hey, I saw you submitted this recommendation to the commissioner, you know, I'd like all documents that, forward that along to Matt, and let the division handle the actual CORA aspect of that. conflicts of interest, just kind of another thing to keep in mind is as your role as a member on the CIC. There's a difference, between a real and an apparent conflict. So if you have a real conflict, for example, you guys are submitting a recommendation that is specific to a public adjusting company, and one of you is invested in the public adjusting company at issue, or something to that effect. There are remedies. I would say keep an eye towards these real and apparent conflicts. I'll give you the apparent conflicts are, appearance of impropriety, anything that would look, kind of sketchy or shady to any member of the public. Keep an eye out for these. If you feel that you have one, loop in Matt and loop in Bobby, and we can kind of determine, if any of these remedies that I have apply. If it rises to the level where you should abstain from a recommendation vote or recuse yourself from those discussions, or, if it's just something that, hey, you need to disclose, oh, I had a bad experience with this insurance company, and so I might be potentially biased in these discussions. If you have something that rises to that level, I encourage you to pass it along to Matt and Bobby, and they can kind of evaluate it with you, loop in us if it's necessary, and we can find a solution that works for everyone. That's all I really have today. If you guys have a few, questions, feel free to ask them. If they get a little substantive, like I said, I might suggest we go into executive session. But I'll make that determination, I guess, based on the questions. Any questions?
I was going to ask a question as a newbie.
Yep.
So to be safe, then, if I interpreted what you said about open meetings laws, so anybody who's not on the council, friends, neighbors, anybody else, I can talk about pretty much anything outside the meeting, but with a council member who happened to end up at the same backyard barbecue, we can talk about anything but any topics that would be in a meeting, and the only thing we can do is put it on the agenda and talk about it amongst ourselves in an actual open meeting, just to keep myself safe.
Yes, I think that's a perfect reading of it. If you and Mark happen to end up at the same backyard barbecue, and the discussion of, how to reduce pharmaceutical costs comes up, keep that for the open meeting. Would be my recommendation. If you want to talk about football or anything else, feel free. But yeah, if it's going to be something that is going to come up at the CIC, just defer it to the CIC meeting.
But again, for non-council members, my friends, my neighbors, I can talk about anything with them because that helps me bring up formulate an agenda item.
Exactly. Yeah. Friends, neighbors, constituents, talk. You guys are representatives. So, if they have a problem, feel free to talk to them. If it's something you think that the CIC should be looking at, feel free to invite them in and have them, present at the meeting.
Okay.
I would encourage you guys to go out and talk to your neighbors about issues that should be brought up at the CIC.
Right, including topics that were brought up inside of a formal meeting. That's all open anyway.
Yeah. If your neighbor, asks you about something that has been brought up at the CIC, yeah, feel free to talk to them about it. But, I would just say in that instance, it would be important to flag, hey, I'm as Chuck, I'm not talking as Chuck. Here, the difference between like your personal opinion versus what the CIC is doing, if that makes sense.
Okay, and that well, I lost my thought there, but as far as different topics, if I think I just lost my thoughts, so I'll come back to it if I remember what I was thinking of. But that sounds good.
Any other questions?
I think I saw Carol's hand raised.
Yes, and this topic did come up over the course of the fall. When we had the executive session in the summer, you gave us some clear, short answers to some questions that we had, such as what is a consensus? My understanding is we can't in any way codify your answers in our operating guidelines. So that, we're going to have new people come on and they're going to ask the same question again. And I was told to take it out of the minute.
I could only hear half of that, so I'll answer the half that I heard, and then if I missed something, feel free to circle back. In terms of codifying things in the operating principles, if you guys want to codify what to you means a consensus, 2/3, 3/4, 100%, that's perfectly reasonable for you guys to codify. It's when it's, hey, we asked, Evan and Heather this specific question and they provided us this specific response that gets into attorney-client privilege. If our answers help to provide insight to you and then you reach a conclusion, and I think for the purposes of the consensus, I think I said it's undefined, probably something where there's no objections. And I saw that you guys had incorporated something to that effect in the operating principles. That's completely fine. I'm just providing legal advice, and then you guys are taking that advice and building it into the operating principles.
Just to follow up, Evan, I would like to send you, there were just 5 short questions and you had very nice, clear answers. And I just wanted to make sure we didn't have to call you into executive session again to ask you the same questions. So if I could just send you, it's like 2 inches in the minute. If I could send it to you and ask you, can we talk about this to the public and in an open session and put it in our operating guidelines, that works.
I kind of recall I don't remember what exactly the 5 issues were. I think my flag was just, hey, maybe don't put the questions and my responses directly into the meeting minutes.
Yeah, if I could jump in here. So we removed the content of the executive session from the public minutes, but we did keep a document that would be available to the members only of that conversation. So it's we kept it confidential.
And, you guys, the CIC is the client, so you can always choose to waive privilege on those. It's just something that you should be aware of when you're including executive session discussions in your meeting minutes. If it's something that, that we've discussed that you feel, hey, we don't need that to be privileged, that's the choice of the CIC. You guys are the client, you can waive the privilege. It's just that when, I just wanted to make you aware that when you put things on the meeting minutes that are, substantive discussions that you've had with Heather and I, that's going to affect in a waiver. And so, it's just to say, hey, let's think about, whether or not we want to waive that, or if there's a way to discuss this without, waiving privilege.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think the question's answered yet. They were very simple questions, such as, can we refer the recommendation when there are absent, members absent, such that and your answer was no. We have to have a majority of the people at a meeting. If we have 9 people, we have to have 5 people to make any recommendation. You answered. These are just straightforward, what can we do? So I don't want to prolong it. I would suggest that we possibly revisit, for Bobby to have these someplace and the new members not even know what's on them. I'm just trying to save time here.
What was there a question there, Carol? And just
The question is without putting your name to it and saying you said so, can we incorporate the content of that into our operating principles?
I think you can incorporate, you can build upon my advice and incorporate that into your operating principles. I understand that, everyone has access to the advice I provided. And so, if you want to have a discussion as to, hey, what constitutes a consensus, that's the CIC's decision as to what constitutes a consensus and as to what, is necessary to send up a recommendation. So, if you guys want to, take the advice that I provided and just, build that into your operating principles, I think that's completely fine. I would just, say, yeah, I think that's fine. As long as you're not saying, hey, Evan or Heather told us X, Y, Z, or if it's more like, well, if, in terms of a consensus, for example, if we get 5 of 9, do we think as the CIC that is a consensus? Should we be evaluating 2/3 where 1/3, either doesn't care or someone strongly objects? Is that something that we want to send up to the commissioner as a recommendation? I think that's for you guys to decide as to what rules you want to set around what goes up.
I think you've answered it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
This is Mark Wayne. I just have a nerdy question. Are we a state body or a local body? You know what I mean?
For the purposes of OML defines you fit within the definition of a state public body because you're an advisory board.
Okay. Thank you.
Gets it gets a little dicier with other statutes, but you guys are, the CIC was created by the legislature and it advises the commissioner. So as to state versus local, you are a state advisory body.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spencer.
Of course. Anyone else? All right. I will hand it back to Matt then. I don't think I'm presenting any longer. I hope I'm not presenting any longer. And you guys will go on to what's next, which is operating principles. So perfect segue.
Thanks,
Wow.
Evan.
Thank you.
Is there a way to get the slideshow? If I can read it again, or is it just going to be on the recording here?
I can send it to you guys. I'll forward it to Bobby and I'll send it to you. And last year I had provided a more thorough memo. So I can send that around as well so that you new members have access to that.
Okay.
I would just say, the slideshow, because I gave it in public, totally, no privilege attaches to that. I'm not concerned about that. The memo, because I'm sending it to you as CIC members, is privileged. So,
Okay.
try to keep it confidential.
Thank you.
Okay, so as Evan
Go for it,
said, the
Bonnie.
next
All
thing,
you.
sorry, Matt, the next thing on the agenda is the operating principles, and the copy that I sent you was the last version of the operating principles with suggestions from Jackie. So I'll let you guys take it away. Or Anaya, if you want to lead this off.
I was gonna ask when is there like a period between the election and the swearing in, or is it just an immediate? But
You are, it's
We do have
immediate.
to organize
Take it
the
away.
inauguration. We need time for
so I am going to share my screen.
I just sent, if I may say, that was a very busy time for us when those operating principles came out. And if any of you recall, I sent in a separate set of operating principles and people wanted to take time to review them. They said it was too soon to look at that. And then we did not take it up again. At that point, we're doing executive session and clarifying a variety of things. So I sent that just again to Bobby. She has it in the minutes. It was there, but it is simply a different format and it differs almost all the way through. And I think it was Wendy who said she just needed time to digest it. So I have an issue, but I'm a minority, so.
So do we want to talk through for a couple minutes? We're about 7 minutes ahead of time on the agenda right now. Do we want to talk through real quick which version we want to be going through? I know that the majority of the council members have had the version that Bobby had sent out for this meeting, and I think at least a few of us went through and made some comments and suggestions. Does anybody have any strong feelings between one document or the other? I know, Carol, you do, but I'm wondering too if while we go through the document that other folks have made comments on, if you could just bring up the points of difference between that document and yours, if that would feel supportive of what you feel like might be missing from the document we've been working from.
Well, like I said, I just simply did it in a different format. And for example, what was just shared with us about those 5 answers from last summer, I would definitely want to now write into the operating principle so that we don't go over again what a majority is, what a consensus is, and we just simply don't say, that came out of executive session. So I think there's some work to be done.
Right. And I think all of those questions, unless I'm forgetting some, are addressed in the version of the operating principles that Bobby had sent out. So I'm wondering if maybe there's just an issue with renegotiating some of the language that's already in there, or if you're seeing things that are still missing.
Well, the session with Evan was in July. I believe my document is dated June 1st. And that was when, again, we had meetings like 2 weeks apart. We were trying to get some things done. And, we didn't get to all that. I defer because, frankly, I defer.
Okay.
I mean, I'm.
So, Carol, if you're okay with it, I'm going to share the document that Bobby sent out and we can go through it. And if there's still pieces that you think we're missing in there, we can absolutely add things. I just want to make sure, I really appreciate the work you put into creating one that you felt had all the components we needed, but I do also want to honor the time and effort the rest of the council members put into commenting and editing on the one that Bobby had already sent. Does that feel good for everybody? Can you all see this?
Yep.
Awesome. While I'm sharing, I can't see any of you. So, Eileen, if you can help me out and see if anybody raises their hand or anything like that.
I shall.
But also just feel free to unmute and throw your feelings at me when you need to.
Could you just make it just a little bit larger so it's easier to read?
Yes.
And then I did some research and I drafted the original document that this has comments on top of. So also back in last summer. So anyway, and everything that I had put in it initially is still there. And then now we have this updated with additional comments from other people. So just so you know.
Great. Is it easier for you all if we just go through kind of section by section? And do you want to each read it yourselves? Do you want me to read it out loud for the group? What's the easiest for folks?
So I think that given that nothing's numbered, I think maybe you need to kind of point us to where we're at.
I can do that. And do you want me to, Wendy, do you want me to do that by just reading the statements out loud, or do you want me to like highlight the section that we're in? What?
Yeah, I mean, like we got the preamble, and then we have bullet point number 1 on the council recommendations, for instance.
Yeah. So why don't we start just with the preamble? And if everybody wants to take a second to read through that with the proposed changes. So I think, I can't see the comment boxes super well. So it looks like Dale added some language. And I just, while understanding Dale is an employee of the Division of Insurance, I just wanted to update it to make sure we weren't broadening our jurisdiction more than we should be.
Yeah, and just so you know, Dale's no longer an employee of the division, but she was when she drafted that. So
got it. Thank you for that update, Bobby. So does that first 2-sentence statement work for everybody? Or 3-sentence, I guess. Sorry.
So Mark does a thumbs up. I have a thumbs up. Anybody else?
So
Jackie,
so the change that I had made was the word reinstituted doesn't happen to be how the law is written. That word happens to be recreated.
Okay. Do we want to change it to recreated?
Sure, why not? Mark has his thumb up. I have my thumb up. Jackie has her thumb up.
No, that's
Chuck is saying yep too.
And then Bobby, I just want to, since Dale's no longer with us in a less morbid than that sounds way, I just wanted to check for my shift from under the jurisdiction of the Department of Regulatory Agencies to just the Division of Insurance. Does that make the most sense for the council?
I have a question. Does the Division of Insurance have, quote, jurisdiction spelled out as their jurisdiction, or is it under
purview or something?
It's just a formal.
yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more purview of the Division of Insurance, and you can actually put both. You can put the Division of Insurance and Department of Regulatory Agencies if you want, or just the DOI is fine.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were staying within the scope of the Consumer Insurance Council, and I know that there's a lot of portions of DORA that don't necessarily fall under what the Division of Insurance does.
Yeah, and purview is a really good word, Anaya, because you're housed in Title 10, which is the insurance statutes. So it totally makes sense to use the word purview there.
Great. I will. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure we keep up with what has been approved. So then this council recommendations section right here, it looks like Jackie made some suggestions as well as Dale. Can folks read through those 3 bullets and let me know if there are any changes? Also, when I have it highlighted, can you all see it still easily?
Yes.
Okay, cool. If everybody just, sorry, what was that?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. I was just going to say, if everybody just wants to read through those 3 bullets and let me know if there are questions, changes, concerns with any of the language in that section.
This is Wendy. I do have a question, concern with bullet number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when you see the word must, there's usually a penalty for failure. In other words, it's mandatory. So I don't understand if this says we have to submit recommendations. If we don't we're not, we're subject to some sort of penalty, or that we ought to be submitting recommendations, that it's advisory, or if there are recommendations, they ought to go to the commissioner. I don't understand the intent of bullet number 2.
I think I recall, and folks feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I recall us having a conversation about changing it to must, not because there's necessarily any outlined penalties if we don't do it, but that was one of the reasons that the council was sunsetted prior to its recreation. So while we might not face any penalties if we don't submit recommendations, it could cause the council to cease to exist for a period of time again.
I mean, something like the council in exercise of its statutory roles should submit recommendations, to me, is a more appropriate way of saying that rather than must.
Yeah.
Could we
So this
just
is
council
Jackie.
leave out the word? The council submits recommendations to the commissioner.
What about the word will?
Why do
Well,
we need a word in
no.
there?
We may not.
Well, I mean, do you want it to be optional? If everybody agrees to submit something to the council in a meeting, do you want it to be optional as to whether you sit on it or actually submit it?
So adopted recommendations shall be submitted, or recommendations adopted by consensus shall be submitted. But to say we have to come up with a recommendation, I mean, there's, a total, it's just silly to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent is that we do come up with recommendations to submit, but I agree that must can have some like punitive connotations to it.
Carol's suggestion to just to say whatever, to cut it down would work too. Council recommendations. What did you say, Carol?
I just said take out that adverb. The council submits recommendations to the commissioner.
Yeah, that would certainly tone it down.
And I don't even know if adopted is the correct word. I mean, a recommendation is a voted action of ours. Before that, it's not a recommendation. It's just a consideration. I think we're trying to get awfully specific.
So does anybody have any issue with it just saying the council submits recommendations to the commissioner, including legislative recommendations?
So the only question that I had was, and this may be covered by the statute, but that we can't make recommendations to anyone else. Like we don't go directly to the legislature, we go to the commissioner. And I think that's part of what's behind this bullet as well, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well, this is Mark Wynn. The summary of the legislation of HB 191150 has a specific statement. The council may submit recommendations to the commissioner, including legislative recommendations. So whoever put that together just copied that exact wording from the summary of legislation. You know what I mean?
Mark, because that's how I wrote the operating principles, was straight from the legislation.
So do we just want to keep?
May.
Yeah, just keep it the way it
the
was.
exact language that exists in the legislation then?
Yeah.
Well, we're back to may, and not must, and that's fine.
Does that work for everybody else?
I guess it doesn't have to be, I mean, I don't know. I just don't have to be super legal. It just may can mean a couple of different things, but if we approve something, then you would think you'd submit it. May means, well, maybe we didn't even approve it. But anyway.
Again, we're just talking about what guided us and the creation of the commission and what we're supposed to do. And to my mind, if the legislation used the word may, then our operating principles should say may as well.
I agree with Eileen.
And what kind of time frame, like when you're talking about timely manner, should it be before the next meeting, or like what is the time frame for submitting and getting a response?
So that's actually a very interesting question, and it came up this fall because we found out that our recommendations were not being submitted until our minutes were posted to the site. So we definitely must clarify this. when does staff send the recommendation? I mean, we finalize the wording, we do the vote, and it's done. The minutes sometimes don't come out for a quarter of the year.
I think, Bobby, can you provide any guidance around, as far as like public meetings and open records, are we able to submit to the commissioner prior to public knowledge of the passage of the recommendations?
The recommendations don't get posted on the website until after the commissioner has reviewed them and responded to them.
Okay.
So the recommendations that were approved by the council at the last meeting were sent to the commissioner. He will review and respond, and then we will get them posted. But I mean, it's up to you guys. We can post them right away once the commissioner responds, or we can wait until after the quarterly meeting and we present them to you all so that you can discuss it, and then we can post them. That'll be up to you guys.
Okay.
One of the major reasons for redoing the legislation, which I testified on during that year where we were sunsetted, was the timely response of the commissioner was not part of the old council. So it was the intent of the legislation this time to ensure that the commissioner can say, look, I've sent it to a committee, I've decided to delay this. They can say anything they want. That's theirs, but the council was to hear back. And there's got to be
Carol, I don't recall timely being defined in the legislation.
It was not.
So I don't know that we necessarily have the power or ability to define a time frame for the commissioner that was not outlined by the legislature.
I don't think we can necessarily define a time frame specifically, but I do think we need to clarify what our expectation is, because again, in the first sentence, of course, is that some of these things have time-sensitive deadlines, these recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to go half a year before there's a response. Then that could be well beyond, that time frame.
Can I make a suggestion that we come up with a request to submit to the commissioner around what our expectations around timely manner look like? I don't know that it needs to be something that exists in the operating principles. I think it is something that likely will have to continue to be negotiated between the council and whoever is serving as the commissioner throughout the future. And I don't know that we want to put something that prescriptive into our operating principles.
We submit it as a recommendation.
Possibly asking the commissioner what they anticipate based on the legislation. We just need to know what to expect.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I don't know that we need to define that any more narrowly in the operating principles themselves.
This is Wendy. In fact, the whole bullet point seems to be beyond our jurisdiction to tell the commissioner what he shall do. It may be in the statute, and that's fine. You should follow the statute. But to put it in here as our operating principle that he shall do it seems to me to really be extending what we can reasonably say.
Yeah. I agree, Wendy.
So I would propose striking the whole third bullet point. Maybe we can come up with amending it to add something about our expectations about what we expect of the commissioner, but not mandate.
Well, I do believe that third bullet is in the legislation. It's
Right.
just the definition of timely is not existent in the legislation.
Even though the third bullet,
That is
why is the third bullet our operating procedure? If this is our operating procedure, what is the legislation mandating the commission to do something? Go with what to do in our operating procedure, not about how we operate.
Right. It's just closing the circle, Wendy, that, you know, we provide recommendations and then the commissioner provides responses to us. That's it. Just closes the circle.
Yeah, well, but it doesn't close it in a way that would give anybody any guidance. It just, again,
But it just describes the process, and the language is from the actual legislation. So the council is authorized to submit recommendations to the commissioner, and the commissioner is required to timely respond to council recommendations. That's it.
Still, if it said something to the effect that the council shall acknowledge timely recommendations or receive from the commissioner, that would be our operating, that we operate to acknowledge it. But just to repeat what the statute says the commissioner should do is just not our operating procedures, but, you know, whatever.
So let me just give another example. We're in the legislative session, and one of the key roles of the council historically has been to make recommendations on legislation, and the commissioner would attend the meetings and would be aware that the council felt that the division should be supportive of certain legislation going through. All I'm saying is we could actually miss the entire legislative session because of our meetings. You know, if we're saying, well, here's this bill going through, we feel the division would be doing the public a service here to be behind it.
Well, and I think, Carol, we have the ability, if as a council we feel that there's important legislation that we should be making recommendations to the commissioner on, we can have a special meeting to make sure that we can put together and approve recommendations to the commissioner on legislation in a timely manner during legislative session.
Well, I only go back to the beginning, is at what point is it submitted to the commissioner? Bobby would have to answer that.
Once I have the recommendations in writing, we submit them to the commissioner.
Well, not based on when the minutes are put out.
No.
Okay, that's satisfactory.
Cool. Did anybody have any questions or concerns around the first bullet that Jackie added?
Yeah, that's the elephant in the room. Consensus, the word definition of consensus.
So that, I think, is addressed down further in a
Oh, it is?
later section. Yeah.
Is that like a quorum consensus or just a consensus?
So the legislation just states consensus. So we do have in a couple sections later, there's a bullet that addresses consensus and a bullet that addresses quorum.
So again, we did get an answer on this, and there is no legal definition of consensus, and we can send through something with a dissenting opinion, and the recommendation was that we identify dissension, that we identify minority views on a vote, shall we say.
Correct.
So,
and there is a legal definition of consensus. It's just a broad definition that we have flexibility within.
But if nobody else is specifying and it's our council, why can't we specify what quorum is and specify what consensus is ourselves, because it's our group, right?
We can, and that's what is in the later sections that we'll get to.
Anaya, this is Jackie. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I can't stay until 4 o'clock. I have to leave 5 minutes before.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay. So outside of the consensus piece, which I think we'll address in a couple of sections, does anybody have any issues with approving the addition that Jackie added and then moving to the next section?
That's fine.
We got thumbs up from Mark, and Chuck said yes, and nobody else has said no.
Great.
And Jackie has a thumbs up too.
Peg is saying yes.
And Peg does too, except I can't see it.
Thank you. It's so strange just like having a conversation with folks when I'm just staring at a Google Doc. So this next section around membership, I believe, is all also, I think most of this that Eileen put in here is directly from legislation. But if there's anything that we think is missing in this membership piece.
Well, I want to bring up another item here, represent consumer organizations. You know, we can just be consumers. We don't have to represent anybody.
That is
right.
true.
That's why there's an or there, Carol.
Right. Yeah, the actual language of the legislation does not say represent consumer organizations. It's just, it says consumers not engaged in the insurance industry.
I believe I took it out in my alternative draft. I think it's important that many groups, commissions and so forth actually do represent certain organizations. And if their spot goes vacant, they get another spot from that organization and whatever. And I think that the legislation this time, the insistence was on the demographic diversity. And I don't remember what it said about geographic. And again, this was
it has it in there. It says the
in there.
council is to reflect the state's demographic diversity in addition to geographic diversity, but need not include representation from each congressional district in the state.
right. So to me, that was the emphasis this time, not representing certain consumer organizations.
Okay. So Eileen, did you say the represent consumer organizations is not in the current statute?
Correct.
So if we take that bullet out and just have it read, these members must be consumers who are not engaged directly, indirectly, blah, blah, blah. Does that feel okay for everybody?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
And real quick, this is Mark Wynn. Are we 2-year terms or 3-year terms? Because mine had a 2-year term, but it's for 3 years. So I was just kind of wondering.
So they're 2-year terms.
Yeah.
But it's actually, Mark, now that you say that.
Yeah.
Mine ran from January 2020 to December 2022. That's 3 years.
So which one is it?
It's a really solid question.
Well, the legislation doesn't say about how long the term is.
Bobby, do you know if, because I know the letters that we all received, I know on mine it was dated for what makes out to be a 3-year term. Is that
An error? It sounds like it might have been an error on my part. They are 2-year terms that can be renewed for 3 years, three consecutive terms.
Okay.
So yeah, if I put 2022, that would have been my error. So it should have been January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2021, wow. I suppose.
So 7 of you all might be gone here in the next 9 months here.
Some of us might need to reapply soon if we want to stick around.
So you'll just check on that for us, Bobby, and put clarification about that.
If you guys would like,
we have our next round.
Yeah, if you guys would like updated letters that clarifies the actual term dates, then send me a separate email and I will update those letters individually. But yeah, the terms are 2-year terms that can be up to 3 terms, renewed for up to 3 terms. So 6 years total is how long you could be a member.
Great.
And
I was more interested. Sorry.
One other thing that came up last year, and I believe you brought up something about the officers. And I don't recollect totally, but I thought your preference was for the officers to be calendar year appointments and to stay the same regardless of when somebody comes on. Am I mistaken? But you had a preference on that.
Did I?
In other words, you were appointed today and your appointment could end, 365 days from today, or it could end December 31st.
I think that makes sense. I think the reason that it happened late this year was because we ran out of time and didn't have any nominations at our January meeting. So I think moving forward, I think a calendar year makes sense. I'm also happy to be told that I am wrong. But just making it a priority in the January meeting to make sure that we're electing new officers.
I think it makes simplicity. And then again, if there's a vacancy, same deal is you fill up until the end of the year. Now, I don't know what happens. I guess everybody else is based on what is everybody else based on the month that they start 2 years?
Yeah, it's date of appointment.
Yeah. First of the month or something. Okay.
So do we have like a master list of our members and their start date and their potential end dates? That's really what I was asking Bobby to do, less that I have a corrected letter for myself, but that we all have clarity about who's going to, expire first kind of thing.
I think she put it on the website, Eileen.
Right now. Ooh, I see a CIC member roster. How exciting.
It may be wrong too. I hope not.
Yeah, it's wrong.
It does say as of January 2020, so that's one problem. It does need to be updated. So, yeah, so it just needs to be updated, Bobby. If I can assign that action item to you, please, because we've got to add our 2 new members who are not showing here, and then update the officer responsibilities.
Great.
Okay,
Are you not?
will do.
Thanks, Bobby.
Are there any other comments or concerns in this section? I want to be cognizant of time. We have 7 minutes left, I believe, to get through the rest of this document.
I could have sworn I already updated that.
Maybe you did, but it's not there. So.
Nope. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I actually was talking to myself. I thought I was on mute. So I apologize. I could have sworn I'm pretty sure I sent it to our web person, but I will make sure it gets posted.
That's great. Yeah, this part is all looking fine to me, Anaya.
Anybody else have any? Great. Moving right along. Absences. And Eileen, can you remind us, is this directly from the legislation or is this something that we decided on?
It must be something we decided because there ain't nothing in the legislation about absences.
Great. Do we want, I think having some standards for meeting attendance is great. Does this feel like it makes sense to folks? Does it feel too harsh? Does it feel too lenient?
And I apologize. There is something in the statute that says that the chair can discuss with the commissioner if a member misses. Let me look it up real quick because there is something about absences.
I know what's wrong is I've been reading the summary, not the actual paper, not the actual words.
Got it.
And
I do that
just
sometimes.
point out it's unexcused absences. Presumably anybody who has announced in advance that I can't make the meeting has an excused absence. Is that true?
That's what it says, unexcused absences, now that I'm looking at the whole bill.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Since I'm looking at the whole bill, we have to go back. It does say, all of whom must represent consumer organizations or be consumers who are not engaged. It is there in the legislation.
So we do need to re-add that part.
I think so.
Okay. Can you read that one more time?
All of whom must represent consumer organizations or be consumers who are not engaged directly or indirectly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So must represent consumer organizations is actually in the legislation. Sorry that I was looking at the summary.
All right. So are we
So we need
in
to add
agreement?
unexcused. Yeah, you have that there.
So 3 or more unexcused absences.
Constitute grounds for removal. That's what it
Mhm.
says.
And attendance or absence doesn't,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jeff.
no, I was going to say, so attendance or absence isn't based on whether you're there in person all the time or whether you're able, like for distance or whether you're able to log in remotely like we're doing now. It doesn't even specify that, right? Which is okay with me.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's I think the way that we have meetings is in the meetings section down below. So it does specify that you can attend meetings remotely. So that wouldn't cause any issues for absences.
Okay.
So then council procedures.
Oh, sorry. Go back. I'm sorry. Go back, Anaya, to the unexcused absences.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So what Bobby was saying, which is what we started looking at, was that the chair, in consultation with the commissioner, gets to decide how to move forward.
Yep, that's the second bullet.
It is there. Okay, good. Just wanted to check because you went by too fast. Thank you.
Sorry. So then council procedures. Does anybody have any questions, concerns with this section?
This again is straight from the legislation.
Yeah, I think they're with an addition. In
All
that
the
last
stuff in
bullet.
yellow is what you're saying?
Yeah, that was an addition from Jackie.
So this is Wendy. The third bullet down, all members of the council may request topics of discussion. Given our emphasis on recommendations, I would think we would want to say and/or propose recommendations.
That is actually in the legislation. All members of the council may request topics of discussion for the council.
Yeah, and I think that would encompass
Recommendations or
recommendations.
potential
Wendy.
recommendations.
But again, the clarification that we had is that there certainly may be objections from council members for the action proposed. The recommendation was that we consider and identify, document a dissenting opinion, but there is no requirement for unanimous.
Right, and it's not necessarily, it's no objection for the action proposed, meaning no objection to move the recommendation forward. But you do have the opportunity to pose a dissenting opinion. But this again, that bullet again to Errol is coming directly from the legislation.
Well, it might be coming from the recommendation, but I would say we don't want people to feel this as a majority. I mean, I'm sorry, a unanimous vote, because it was clarified to us that it does not need to be unanimous.
Right, there is a difference between that and consensus.
Correct.
On the highlighted bullet, what's the difference between a proposal and a recommendation? I don't understand the grammar there. Proposal's recommendation. What proposal's
It
recommendation?
starts with a proposal before it becomes a recommendation.
So it's missing a word then. An updated list of council proposals and recommendations and?
So updated list of council proposals, recommendations regarding the proposals,
It's just grammatically.
and responses.
It might be recommendations resulting from the proposals as opposed to regarding.
Well, a proposal can be just something on the agenda, right? And then the
Correct.
recommendation comes out of it.
Correct. And then a response to the recommendation. That's the cycle, the life cycle. And an idea, a recommendation, and then a response to the recommendation.
So again, I would propose the comma come out and the word "and" be added. The updated list of proposals and recommendations.
Sorry, Wendy, you were cutting out. Could you say that one more time?
So I would propose that the comma after the proposals come out and the word "and" be inserted, if they are two different things. Because right now, it's not English grammar.
Well, so it is a list of 3 things. So it's the proposals, the recommendations resulting from the proposals, and the response to the recommendations.
Okay, all right. It's just hard reading. All right, if you're saying that
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of,
words in between.
yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of words to identify the things within the list.
Mr. Chair, it is
You need to
4:02.
back up and
Yeah.
bullet when you have time.
Yep. So thank you, Eileen. So it is 4:02. If everybody's good with this section, I would like to propose that we put the remainder of this document as the first thing on the agenda for our next meeting.
Anaya, I need to have that meeting minutes identified. That's something that is not in the legislation. Bobby and I have discussed this for a year, but this has never been, this administrative function has never been
Carol,
a function.
can
of the council.
we discuss that at the next meeting? It's 4:03 and I want to be conscious and respectful of everybody's time today.
But you
So
said you're passing this section. I don't want to pass this section.
well, we're not passing anything. We're going to pass the document as a whole. So we'll put this on the agenda for first thing at the next meeting. Does that work for everybody? So we can all get on with the next things in our days?
That's fine as long, this is Mark Wynn, as long as we define what consensus is. I still don't see it in this draft, but we'll talk about it.
It's right here, 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet, right on this page. So we can look at that and then we can discuss it more in our next meeting.
Under council procedures, that's the
Yeah, so it
definition of
says the
consensus is
council-
consensus?
The council must act by consensus, which means that the council reach general agreement and that there is no objection from any council member for the action proposed.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. We need to have like a 2/3 or 70% or something.
That's not consensus. 2/3, 70%
So,
voting, not consensus.
Mark, I don't know that we can create a definition outside of the one that exists in the statute.
Well, we have one from the attorney in the summer. I'll send it to everybody.
That's why I asked Anaya about when I had the Assistant Attorney General define what major hurdle to vote to go in executive session. He said 2/3. He quantified what major action is.
For going into executive
So
session, not for.
It is separate from recommendations. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
No, no worries at all. I'm sorry. So,
I'm sorry, Anaya, before you wrap up, if you would just send me this document and then I can forward it to all of the members before the next meeting.
yes, yeah, and this is just the Google Doc that you had sent out that I'm editing, Bobby. But
Okay.
I'll resend the link so it's easy. But yeah, I will make sure that that is the first thing after approving a recording of meeting minutes. I'll make sure that's the first thing on our agenda for next meeting so that we can make sure that we have operating principles in place to move forward. Thank you, everyone, and I apologize for going 5 minutes over today, but we're gonna get these operating principles nailed down. It's gonna be fantastic.
So the next meeting we have are anticipated is 1 in April, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, it'll just be our next standard quarterly meeting.
It's not 1 April, is it? Is it April 1st or is it a different date in April?
It's a different date in April.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the first Wednesday in April.
Yes, April 7th.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.